Hi, and welcome to Dinim number 12. Dinim number 12. We're back in text. We are going to do, James, if you can, now that I'm just thinking out loud, if you can go and fetch 58b in Bava Metzia, is that a possibility? To get 58b in Bava Metzia and post the image. Is that possible? Affirmative. Okay. Bava Metzia 58b will be served up soon on your viewing screen. So let me start with my viewing screen, as in the Gemara on my stender. All right. Just as there is, they translate it as overreaching, ona'ah, b'mekach u'memchar, and buy and selling. You know what overreaching is, Jacques? Jacques, do you know what overreaching is? One or two. Hello. It's when you wanted to sell me and I get Nilva hat for $1 million because I'm a foreigner and you wanted to take advantage of me. That is ona'ah, right? And literally, what's the definition of a foreigner? A ger, right? A stranger. So when I'm a foreigner in Cape Town, you're going to take advantage of the foreigner, and you're going to rip me off. Call that ripping off. So is there wrong by selling? So is there wrong done by words? You cannot rip me off with words, Jacques. You cannot rip me off with words. Thus, one must not ask another. You cannot say, what is the price of this article? If he has no intention of buying. If a man was a repentant sinner, what is the word for repentant sinner? And that is a bal tshuva. Do not say to him, remember the deeds, your earlier deeds. If he's ben gerim, you don't say, remember the deeds of your fathers. As it says, V'ger lo sona v'lo talchatzinu. All right? So now we understand it very well. Do not rip me off. Do not waste someone's time, and do not. How does that work? How's the Bal Tshuva work there? That's a good question. 1 second. How does that work? If a man was repentant, one must not say, remember your former deeds. Now that's a question. How is that called ona'ah? What do you think, Jacques? Why is reminding someone of their sins ona'ah? Why is that ripping them off? Why is that ripping them off? Anybody has an answer to this? The Bal Tshuva. And they remember they are Jewish now. They were always Jewish. The Bal Tshuva is a Jew, born Jew. The Ben Gerim is something else, and the language of the verse is something else, but we're not there yet. But why is that ripping them off? Right? You don't rip off the stranger. All right, so ripping off with words. Don't say, how much is this cost? So there's ona'ah b'dvarim. I'm not sure. Why is there ona'ah in words that you can't remind me of my sins? I wouldn't call that ripping someone off. We got to find out today, how is that ripping them off? Remember the premise for Dinim. Who remembers the premise of Dinim? Who remembers the premise of Dinim? Anyone? We learn Torah for basically Jews and non-Jews through Ger Torah. Not only look it up, but Ger Torah, which the naysayers will say there is no such thing as Ger Torah David Katz made it up, right? And that is just not true. We are going to show a prime example here in Bava Metzia 58b, Ger Torah Type 1. By the way, there was a comment that came on our favorite blog site today. Jacques saw it. The reason why I am making this up and the reason why it is wrong to have this class, apparently I am teaching a bunch of Christians. That makes you a bunch of Christians. Is that not ridiculous? That's how low the opposition goes. That apparently we are a Christian movement perpetuating Christianity's attempt to take over the land of Israel. That's what's going on in this class, apparently. I find that a bit odd. A bit odd. All right, aside from that, little news flash. Let's keep going. There's no note here. No, there is, actually. Number 11. Number 11. Is there a footnote on 11? All right, this is going to be our mission, okay? This is going to be our mission. Why is it wrong to curse Ibo Tshuva? And that's called ripping him off. Imhu ben gerim ona advarim mahama nimakayim imhu. Okay. So you know what? We got to read the Gemara because apparently it's a question. There you go, James Rogers. Okay, so James, go ahead and read us the Gemara. I'll follow in the Hebrew.
Our rabbis taught, ye shall not therefore wrong one another. Scripture refers to verbal wrongs. When you say verbal wrongs, but perhaps that is not so.
Wait. Can we get the echo off? Is that possible? All right. I'm going to compare text here because I got issues. Tana Rabbanan, our rabbis taught. Lo Toto, you shall not wrong, I guess, ish es amiso, one another. Ba'onas Devarim. They didn't put Onas Devarim in there. The concept is Onas Devarim. We're going to call that ripping someone off with words, okay? And that's exactly our question, isn't it? Ba'onas Devarim, that's our question. What is that? Okay, ripping off with words is, hey, I want to buy that, but I'm not going to. As it's written, to verbal wrongs, Haksuv Medabir, it's written as verbal wrongs. But perhaps that is not so. Monetary wrongs, wait, you say verbal wrongs, perhaps that is not so, monetary wrongs being meant. That's what I'm saying. It's usually a monetary thing. Haksuv medaber ata omer ba'onas dvarim, o eno ela ba'onas mamon. Kishahu aimer v'ki temachru mimvar la'amischa. Yeah, I agree with the Gemara's question here. Do you guys all agree with the Gemara's question? How do you rip somebody off with words rather than money? Type 1. That's our question. And if thou sell aught unto thy neighbor, or acquirest aught of thy neighbor, ye shall not wrong one another. Monetary wrongs are already dealt with. Okana miyad amisecha hari onas mamon amor hamani makayim lo sono ish es amiso iba onas tvarim. How do you rip somebody off with words? Lo sono ishes amiso ba'orosvarim ha-kitzad. The Gemara asks the question. You guys all hear the question. How do you rip somebody off with words? That's all. Why is that called ripping somebody off? Ha-kitzad. Im haya bo tshuva al yamer lo zacher maisecha harishonim Im haya ben gerim al yaimir lo zacher ma'isa v'secha. Im haya ger ubolo med Torah al yaimir lo pesha achol nevelas v'trefish shkatzi v'rimashim bolo med Torah shenemra mepia gevoira. Okay. Everyone read the English. See if it works. If a man is a Baal Tshuva penitent, one must not say to him, remember your former deeds. If he is the son of Gerim, he must not be taunted with, remember the deeds of your ancestors. If he is a ger, does that say ger? If he's a ger and comes to study Torah, one must not say to him, shall the mouth that ate unclean and forbidden food, abominable and creeping things, come to study the Torah, which was uttered, Jacques, your favorite word, don't say the mouth of omnipotence, mepi hagavoira, from the mouth of God we heard too. That's the connotation with mepi hagavoira, and that's the word used, mepi hagavoira. Okay, that's what they're calling ripping off with words. I don't know why that's called ripping off. This is what we're going to investigate tonight. It's why I wanted to investigate. Im hayu yisurim bayin alav, im hayu chaloyim bayin alav, u'shah haya mikvar is bon of all yamar lo kadira sha'amru lo chavirav lo oyev, surely yirasecha kislatecha tikvatecha v'tum darchecha zachar na mihu naki avid im hayu chamarim avakshin tavua v'meinu lo yamar lehem lechu. That's so plony. Shumaycher tvua v'yodoyabo shalom acher meyoylam v'yoylam yer'af lo yisala inav al mekak b'shar she'in lo dami shahari hadaber masur lalev v'kol davar masur lalev namar bo v'yiris melohecha. Right, that little piece we didn't need to focus on. Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Yoshimin ben Yochai. Okay, now skip down to where that check mark is down there, the bottom of the page. James, we might... Ooh, who's this? Nunny! Everyone say hello to Nunny. Say hello to Nunny. Jacques, you know Nunny? All right? He was the one who graced us with a Skype phone call in Cape Town.
Check 1 2.
Check 1 2.
Shalom, Nunny.
Nunny, how are you? So skip now down to Rabbi Yochanan in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai at the bottom. All right, I'm Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Gadol Oinus Dvarim. There's a halacha here. We're going to look that up, God willing. Gadol Oinus Dvarim. Oinus, greater is ripping off in words than ripping off in money. Shezeh Nemar Bo v'yiras me'elohecha. That's a pasuk from Vayikra 25:17. V'lo sono ish es amiso v'yiras me'elohecha ki ani Hashem Elehechem. V'lo sono ish es amiso v'yiras me'elohecha ki ani. Interesting. Okay. V'yiras me'elohecha v'zeh lo nemar bo v'yiras me'elohecha Rabbi Elazar oimer zeh begufo v'zeh bit mamono. One is in money, one is in the body. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani Amar ze nitan le hashivon v'ze lo nitan le hashivon. Tani Tana Kami the Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. We're going to go over this. Don't worry. Kol hamalabin panei chavero barabim. One who whitens the face of his friend amongst the people. It's like he spilled blood. Amar le shap your kamarta de chazina le da azil sumka. Va'ase chavora amar le abai the Rav Dimi ma'arva ma'bai zihiri. Amar le ba'acharai ape. Okay. I know it continues on 59b. Let me see how it gets to 59b before we start going into the fine print. They quote the Tana Rabbanin, Hamana is a ger. So the one who rips off the ger, it's actually 59b and not 58b that mentions the ger specifically by ripping off, commits 3 crimes. He transgresses 3. You transgress 3 Veger Losona. That's coming from Shemot 22:20. Look it up. V'ki yagor icha agir ba'artzchem lo sono oso. That's coming to you with Vayikra 19:33. V'ki yagor icha agir ba'artzchem lo tono oso. V'lo sono ish es amiso. And that's coming to you from Vayikra 25:17. V'ger b'chlal amiso hu luchzo nami shlosh ksive. Again, we're transgressing three things. V'lo talchzuno, v'ger lo talchitz, v'lo tiye lo kanose, v'ger b'chlalhu. Ela achad ze v'chad ze b'shlosha. Tanya Rabbi Eliezer Agadol Omer mipnei ma zira Torah. This is Nani's favorite thing in the world. Why does the Torah say 36 times? And some say 46 times, mentioning the ger, because of Shesuro Ra. The ger has a Yetzer Hara, and you don't taunt the ger. They're trying to turn away from evil. My Duksiv, as it's written, V'ger lo sona v'lo talchtzenu ki gerim, because you are gerim in the land of Egypt. Okay. So that's why, the bottom line, Nani, why we say that this Gemara refers to gerim proper is because it's the 46 mentionings of ger in the Chumash. Nani type 1 that you concur that. Nani type 1 that you concur that. 46 times it says ger under this context. So when it says ger in that context, I'm kind of in shock that someone would question if it's referring only to ger the convert, ger the non-Jew, the ben gerim, and the Baal Tshuva. Is it not, even on a simple level, is it not mashma or clear all of our friends that come under the ger umbrella are in reference to don't rip somebody off in the terms of mentioning ger 46 times in the Chumash? No one is defining ger as a Baal Tshuva or this or that. It's when it says ger in terms of don't rip somebody off, it actually loses the literalness to it, and it's an umbrella. Don't rip off the following people included in ger. Nani, do you concur with a 1 or do you refute with a 2? Everybody else, where are you holding? 1 or 2? All right, everybody's with me. Now that we understand it, we still don't understand why is that called ripping off? Why is that called ripping somebody off? When in relation to the monetary version of ripping somebody off. Now we got to start digging. Ready to start digging? Are you guys ready to start digging? The problem is we don't understand this word ona'ah. Kishem sha'ona'ah b'mechach u'memchar. Aha. See? It actually has nothing to do with money. It has, the whole Mishnah is about words. Kishem sha'ona'ah b'mechach u'memchar. Just like you can rip somebody off with money. Kach ona'ah b'dvarim. Lo yamer lo v'kama chafetz zeh. Aha. So the seller rips off the foreigner. Type 1. But you, the buyer, the purchaser, can rip off the seller. How much does this cost? So you're taunting him. You're taunting him. You're not really interested. You're going to learn Torah when yesterday, blah, blah, blah. So you're taunting him. It turns out then, when the ripping off is actually taunting. But we need to look up that halakha. I want to find out what ona'ah means. You guys want to know what that means? Ona'ah? I want to know what it means. And let's look at the halakha just for context. Ready? We got the Rambam. Let's look up ona'ah. I'm not convinced that I know what ona'ah means. And therefore, I'm not convinced you know. I'm just not convinced. Ona'ah, Aleph Vav Nun, 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 Aleph Vav, Aleph, Aleph, Aleph Vav, Aleph Vav Nun. Aleph Vav Nun. Aleph Vav Nun. Aleph Vav Nun. Aleph Hey. Oppression, wrong. Oh, we got a good one here. Oppression, wrong. It quotes our Gemara. You know what we call this? When the Jastro dictionary quotes your Gemara, we call that a Jastro jackpot. We got a Jastro jackpot. The wrong you do by means of words, wounding one's feelings. Okay, so wronging through words. One should always be on his guard not to wound his wife's feeling. Imposition, overreaching, fraudulent representation. To be imposed upon, overreach. So ona'ah, in the meaning of the word, lends itself to the monetary, and it naturally lends itself to the verbal. Jacques, do you think it's an accident that the Talmud used the name of God, Mepi HaGavora, here? What do you think? Is that an accident? That in ona'ah, it is an accident? we see ona'ah literally can be financial and verbal. It just lends itself. And I find it very, very apropos that the Talmud uses the name of God, which it very rarely uses, and that is Mepi HaGavora. I find that interesting. Very, very, very interesting. Let's look up the Rambam. Rambam, chapter 14, Laws of Mechira, 12. 14:12, Mechira. 14:12. 14:12. 14:12, Sefer Kinyan. 14:12, Sefer Kinyan. 14:12, Sefer Kinyan. 14:12, Sefer Kinyan. 14:12. Fourteen, 12. Kashem shahaniya b'mechel memchar kach honaya b'dvarim. Okay, so I guess the grammar changes to honaya. Honaya, the Rambam says. Honaya b'mechel memchar kach honaya b'dvarim. Shnemar v'losono ish amiso v'yaris b'lecha ani Hashem zo honayis dvarim. Let's look at this new word of the Rambam. He changes the grammar. Let's see what that means. Honaya. I don't know what honaya means. Any guys know what honaya means? Honaya. Honaya. Hona'ah. It's just a hey instead of the aleph. Oppression, wrong, imposition, fraudulent, representation. Okay, oppression. So if I rip you off, it's oppression. And when you say how much does it cost, you're not going to buy it. Fraudulent representation. Imposing. Yeah, it's a two-way street. So therefore, since you're ripping me off in business, and I can rip you off, I'm not selling you anything, but with words I can rip you off. Therefore, the Gemara is saying, since it exists in possibility that I can rip you off with words, you can probably rip off a lot of people. Which is interesting because the proof of ripping off is with the ger, and it is more about insulting the ger than monetary. by the literal dictation of the verse. So the real taunt is the pshat more so than the ripping off aspect. All right, number 2, Rambam, Sham, Hilchos 13. Let's look up again. The very next law in the Rambam. All right, just close the book. Let's open the book again. 14, 12, 13. How gay? The Rambam says, what is this? What does it mean ripping off with words? Haya bo tshuva. Remember, what are the 3 verses that we learn ripping off from? It's a 3-letter word. Go ahead and type it in there. There are 3 verses that teach us what it means to rip off. What are those verses? Where are they coming from? I'll give you a hint. It starts with a G and it ends with an R. And it's not Guns N' Roses. Right? Everybody know? Ger. Right? It's the Ger verses that teach what it means to rip off in finance and in words. So the Rambam is saying, what do you mean rip somebody off with words? Bo tshuva, you don't say remember your earlier deeds. Ben gerim, remember what your parents did. A ger comes to learn Torah. You don't say to him, the mouth that ate nevelas and treifas has come to learn Torah that was given from the mouth of God, Metzia Gavoira, that they were sick and bothered, and it came unto them, or that it was shahaya mikever es banav lo yamer lo kadera shamro. Someone to bury his kids. You don't say like the matter of Eov and his friends. It's illegal to be a jerk to another person. Isn't that nice law? It is illegal to be a jerk. And who are you illegal to be a jerk to? Ben Gerim, a Bo Tshuva, a Ger, or someone in grieving. Can someone explain to me why the Noahide Ger, if you want to call it that, is not included in this? Can anyone please explain this to me? How it is not taunting the Ger? Am I off on this? It seems pretty clear to me. Nani, what do you think? This to me seems pretty crystal clear. Pretty clear, especially calling it Ger. Especially calling it Ger. But don't say we never heard of this new category of Ger. It literally says Ger. And it means in the Aramaic it says Giora, which is every type of Ger under the sun. All right, those are the 2 halakas. Let's just follow the printer's wisdom all the way down. We got the verses again. Exodus 22:20. Then we got Vayikra 25:17. Yeah, there's a bunch of them. 3. V'kidim chum dimcha. Vayikra 25:14. 2. We go back to that one again. V'im haya ger. Okay, Gimel Rambam. All right, we read about the ger. We read about the ger. 4. All right, we read that Rambam also. And okay. Kula malabin panei chavero, all who whiten their friend's face. Rambam. Let's go ahead and look up that Rambam. Let's look up that Rambam. Ready? Let's look at that Rambam. We skip down to the bottom of the page. All that whiten their friend's face, they embarrass their friend. Rambam, chapter 6, 6-8 in Deus. 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 And we have reproving your friend. Don't say to him harshness until he's to the point he gets embarrassed of klima, which is absolute shame. As it says, you might think to reprove him and upana of mishtano, to change his face. No, you don't reprove your friend to the point of embarrassment. How many people are breaking that law? From here, it's usher to embarrass Israel and all the all the more so in public. Even though that embarrassing your friend, you don't get whips or lashes. It's a tremendous sin. Thus, the wise sages have said, embarrassing your friend, hey, you have no portion of the world to come. Therefore, a man needs to be careful in this, that he should not embarrass his friend in public, whether he's a small friend or big friend. And don't call him a stupid name. Velo Yisapir, don't speak in front of him something that's embarrassing about him. And with words said, Bein Adam Lechavero, but in words of heaven, Im Lo Chazer Bo Benister Malchimin Oso Barabim, right? Words that are sacred, you don't reveal. Okay, that's that. And again, it's Hanayas Dvarim, and now we want to turn the page. James Rogers, if you want to put the bottom of 59B up, the bottom of 59B. It's all the Gemara is talking about this, but again, we want to focus on the ger element. And we come back to the Tana Rabbanan. Hama'ana, where's that from? Halacha Beis, Rambam 14, Hilchos Mechira, Halacha 15 and 16. Okay, Rambam 15 and 16. Rambam 15 and 16. And there might be a Shulchan Aruch on this. There is. How do you like that? We're going to see the ger and a Shulchan Aruch. That's going to be really big. You guys are going to see breaking serious ground here. Who wants to see breaking serious ground? Anybody? Beis, Hilchos Mechira, Halacha 15, 14, 15, 16, 14, 15, 16, 14, 15, 16. Okay, here we go. This is the Rambam about not taunting the ger. You ready? Kol hamayne es hager, bein b'mamon, bein b'dvarim, oder b'shleishe lavin. Shneimar v'ger lo sona l'zo hastvarim. Anyone who insults the ger is over on 3 counts. All right, 15 and 17. And we don't know what kind of ger it is now. We have to figure out the ger. Ready? So, okay. So again, there's something in the world called a ger. And when you taunt him, you are liable. It seems to me that a Baal Tshuva and Ben Gerim is included in the penalty of taunting the ger. Again, I don't know how much more clear that could have been when I taught this at the wall, but the comeback that came back was that Rabbi Katz is wrong for translating Baal Tshuva as ger. Rabbi Katz never said the definition of ger is Baal Tshuva. We expect people to be able to learn properly inside the Gemara. Right, but now before we do the commentaries on the Rambam, let's go weiter a little bit. They quote the verses. Quote the verses. 3 again. And 4 is there again. And pardon me while I go get the Shulchan Aruch. Ready? This is very big. This should be a really nice revelation here. So, the Shulchan Aruch. Torah Shulchan Aruch Hoshen Mishpat 228.2. Be right back. Hoshen Mishpat 228.2. Hoshen Mishpat 228.2. This is the Shulchan Aruch, the section called the Hoshen Mishpat, the laws of damages. Apparently, it is wrong to taunt the ger in today's halakhic world. And we want to know what a ger is. Does everybody want to know what a ger is? Anybody else want to know what a ger is? Apparently, there's a thing called a ger that is halacha, that if you taunt him, you have broken 3 laws based on 3 different verses. What do you think? What do you think? All right. Asur la'onos b'dvarim lignov das bris l'ramos b'mekach u'memchar. Very nice. It is forbidden to taunt with words, to steal das, to steal someone's knowledge. Das habris, it says of creation. And to be dodgy in sales. All right, so he's introducing it in Aleph. Ours is Beis. Sarich li zahir b'yoyser b'onas hager, bein b'gufo, bein b'mamono, l'fisho huzahar alav b'kama makimis. All right, so there's a lot of people that we're not allowed to rip off, but there's a special emphasis on the ger because of 46 times it's written. Vav. He says, look in the Mishnah and the Brisa on 59b. Okay? All right, so then we're going to have to look up the verses to find out which ger that is. Gimel, certainly Zahir ba'onas ishto. Also in the woman, you don't do it to. Then he says, what's an example of Ketzad onas dvarim? Let's see here. Let's see here by Ploni Odea Sheilo Memem Chlor V'Lavero. Don't rip Baal Tshuva, a purchaser, a Baal Tshuva. Lo Yamer Lo Zachar. You don't remember your earlier deeds and Ben Gerim. So, okay, right. So, So the Baal Tshuva, the Ben Gerim. They are examples of somebody that you oppress. So the Shulchan Aruch wants to say special emphasis on a ger proper because of the 46 times, and also on a woman, which is not the ger, because that's brought down in somewhere else, which I'm not exactly aware of where it's at. Maimra de Rav. I guess Rav over there in 71, or either 70a or 71 in Bava Metzia. And then it says Ches there in the Mishnah. This is the example of how you rip somebody off or offend them. Let's look at the commentary on the page. See what we find. Ana Amiyad. That's not what that is it? Apparently it is. Where does that say that? It doesn't say that, does it? What is that? 228. Bays. I think it's a different bays. Yeah, that's a different bays. Okay, so now we have Vav. We have Vav. So not much commentary in the Shulchan Aruch. Let's go to the Torah and see what we find in the Torah, which is the predecessor to the Shulchan Aruch. Let's see if he brings more details. Right now we're holding, and we have is there a know where we're holding? We understand the issue, and so far, we just don't know what a ger is. Right? We know that you cannot rip people off at least the same way that you would want to rip off a ger, like the Baal Tshuva. The Gemara doesn't make a distinction. The Shulchan Aruch does. The Gemara obviously is the source. And we need to look up the 3 verses to see what a ger is. Because apparently those sources, whether you're a Baal Tshuva or a ger, the root is in those sources. All right, so don't rip anybody off in sales. It's greater ripping off in words than money. One is the bodily, one is money. Yoter tzarich lizaher ba'onas hager. The ripping off of a ger is extremely severe because of the 46 times. And it's actually the ger's literalness in the verses, and it's the ger, the ripping off of the ger is the same as the Baal Tshuva. That's why Rabbi Nachman puts them together. Yesterday you were eating treif, and today you're learning Torah. All right, we've got the Beis Yosef. Not saying too much. And let's see what's here. Not too many people are getting into it. They're bringing it. But we have to discover what a ger is. You guys want to discover what a ger is? Does anybody want to discover what a ger is? Because apparently that is our last issue here. We figured out the concept. So now we need to figure out what a ger is. Okay, what is a ger? There's a type of person in the world that you're not supposed to, I just call it now for the sake of discussion, you're not supposed to rip them off. You know what I mean by when I say rip them off? Right? This guy, you're not supposed to rip him off. And we need to find out why. Why can't we rip him off? By the way, Nani, this is Rav Kahan's big thing. All right. Let's see here. So the verses we're going to use are the 3 lavin, the 3 transgressions that you made. All right, 3, 4, 5. Ready? 3 Shemos 22:20. Let's just start with Shemos 22:20 for the sake of discussion. Everyone get Exodus 22:20. Again, Exodus 22:20. Ready? Wait a second. Yeah, get 22:20 in Exodus. Anybody want to post it? Post it. $22.20. Again, we already know the Indian. We want to see now how ger law becomes law. Does everybody understand that? The ger supposedly teaches us onas dvarim. Supposedly the ger is this thing called a ger, and from that we learn don't be a jerk. Type 1. Apparently there's a ger, and we learn from the ger not to be a jerk. Rashi, onas dvarim. Okay, Rashi says, look in 22:20. Don't taunt the ger. How do you translate that? 1 second. On a very simple level. This is what our commenter in the email suggested, 22:20. That the following word is the comment, is explanation. You shall not taunt or oppress a ger. Don't taunt the ger, so the tilchatzenu is to oppress. So don't taunt ger and don't oppress them, because y'all were gerim in Egypt. So it's taunt and oppress. Taunt and oppress. Taunt and oppress. Rashi on don't taunt the ger with insulting, jerky words. Yesterday, you were eating treif. All right, what is Rashi's Lafib Shuto of don't taunt the ger? Everyone say type. Yesterday, you were eating treif. That is the taunt of the ger. What is oppressing the ger? Stealing money. So basically, the oppression and the taunting are different, because there's something called gezel a ger. There's something called stealing from a ger. So if you steal from the ger, it's one aspect, of taunting, but taunting with words. So the idea of finances and words, Rashi splits them. And then Rashi's going to get that from the Sifri, most likely. And we're going to look that up. You better believe it's taunting. But we have to prove if you're that ger. Because that's what her issue is going to be. Is that she's a convert and she's saying, I'm the ger. And you're saying you're also one of the ger. We're going to find out. Because y'all were gerim, im honaso, af hu yakul lahonasecha, klemer lecha afatim gerim, be'es mum shebecha al tamar lechaverecha, kulashin ger. Look here, boys and girls. Rashi tells you the definition of a ger. Who wants to know the definition of a ger? Does anybody want to know the definition of a ger? Every usage of ger is a man that was not born in this country. Rather, he comes from another country to dwell there. Gee, look at that. Nani, what do you think about that? A Bo Tshuva comes from far away, moves into Flatbush. He suddenly is a ger. Look at that. Look at that. By Rashi's definition, Kulashin ger, Adam Shalom Nolad Ba'osa Medina, Elabah Medina, Cheres Lagorsham. Ronnie, how do you feel about that? That's Rashi. That's Rashi. Let's look inside the Torah Tamima. V'ger lo soine afilu onas tavarim shelo yamar lo. Okay, so it's the taunt is you were sinning yesterday. The taunt is because 46 times it says don't taunt the ger because of Soro Ra. He's trying to do bad and you're taunting him. That is the unique yetzer of the ger, different than the Jew. Therefore, the Torah dafka commands on the ger because he has a different spiritual makeup. Last time I checked, a convert was a Jew. Therefore, they have changed their yetzer to a Jewish yetzer, and they are Jews. The ger remains with a type of yetzer that if you taunt him, Kabbalah, you call it the klipos noga. He is fighting evil more so than anybody else. Ger, don't taunt him. You get 3 averas if you do. Don't oppress him. Lochetz es hager oiver b'shlosh lavim. Okay, there's a whole set of circumstances if you oppress him. Footnotes. 187. 188. 188. B'mishnah Isa holoshin imu bo tshuva lo yamar lo zchu zachar ma'asecha rishonim ve'im hu ben gerin lo yamar lo zchus zachar ma'asecha v'secha v'suva taisvis de lo ze af zo katani lo mebaye shalo yazchrenu ma'isa atzmo elo afilo ma'isa musav akum rishonim v'kavanasav lo mebaye bo tshuva shalo yamar lo zachar ma'isa rishonim elo afilo ben gerin shakavar nola b'yahadut la'aviv Hager, the lo shayesh jesochreno ma'isa atzmo, lo yamer lo zachar ma'isa avosecha. Let's read that again. Okay, he's asking our Bal Tshuva question. The kavana, lo meboye Bal Tshuva. You don't have to say Bal Tshuva. Shalo, that you shouldn't say, remember your early deeds, even ben gerim, that already were born in Judaism to a father who was a ger. It's not shaykh that they should remember the Maisa himself. By the Bal Tshuva. By the Bal Tshuva. He did a sin by himself. Ben Gerim, their parents were Gerim. They were born kosher. You also can't say to him, the guy was in Flatbush all of his life, but his parents were gerim. Also him, even though he didn't sin, you can't shame him. Your parents were shkatzim. Can't do that. So the Bal Tshuva is more ger than ben gerim. How do you like that? That's a quotable, Nani. That's a quotable. And here's the idea about the Yetzer Hara. Ready? What does it mean the Yetzer Hara is bigger for a ger? 36 places it's mentioned in Torah to be careful with the ger. I'm saying this, just like with Nefesh a ger, they have to have the ger Shabbat because their Nefesh is attached to Hashem now. So therefore the Yetzer. And though some say 46 times that the Lashon Gerim, Hayisum Kiyosibel, the Inyan of Soro Ra, turning from evil, Rashi explains in Horayas 13a that, that his Yetzer Hara is evil, and therefore he separates from it. Or rather, Lafi Perizet, this commentary, is possible to explain here that since the Yetzer is greater and it strengthens on him, he has a massive merit for being ger. And therefore, the Torah says a lot of times don't rip him off, don't oppress him. But in Kedushin, Sham, Kosha Iskim Im Hanashim, okay, but women are a little different. Okay, that's the Torah Tamima. And let's go in the Chumash. 2220, 2220, 2220, 2220, 2220. The Ibn Ezra, this is one of my favorites. You don't taunt him because he's not Jewish, he's not Israel, and he doesn't have the power of Israel behind him. And listen to this. Tell me if this is a convert or a ger. Ready? On the ger that you are not to taunt, because the ger has received on himself not to serve idols, and therefore you do not taunt him in your land. Is that a convert or a ger? This ger rejected idolatry, and when he's in your land, you are not to taunt him. I find that pretty hard to be a convert, because there is a koach rav mimenu. The Jew has a power of a stronger power, and the ger doesn't. It says that, remember, you were a ger in Egypt, Mr. Jew, and just like it mentions, the ger has no power, just like orphans and widows, and those are Jews that have power, orphans and widows, and the ger doesn't have power, but he does not have the power of Yisrael. That is why he has no power, because he's not Yisrael. Pretty hard to be a convert if you're not Yisrael. Pretty hard to be a convert if you're not Yisrael. Let's go to the Midrash just to see what we find, because we can do that. We have a good time. 2220, 2220, 2220, 2220, 2220. Ger lo yisrael yidnei she nismecha parshas the ger l'avodah zarah. Why is the parsha of ger next to the chapter of idolatry? To teach you that all who oppress the ger, it's like you do avodah zarah. Because if you say to him, a Yisrael, to a ger, you are treif, you ate pork. How much neshikot yesh lecha? You just kissed the avodah zarah. The ger, se'or shelo ra, he's turning from evil. V'shema yagzor l'avodah zarah shelo, he's always in danger of going back to his avodah zarah, and it comes out that you caused it. It's ki'ilu, as if you served avodah zarah. So if you cause a ger to go back to avodah zarah, then you, the taunter, went back to avodah zarah. Therefore, we connect the parsha of ger with avodah zarah. Pretty serious words, isn't it, guys? Pretty serious words. And we see it happening. We see it happening. God loves gerim because it's mentioned the 46 times. They turn away from evil. Don't taunt the ger. God loves gerim. You know like this, Jacques? It even says the word nilva. Hatzvia ze nilva imatzon. The ger is nilva. That's the entire crux of the matter. When the ger is nilva, that's the one that you don't taunt. A convert is not nilva. He is a Jew. It's the nilva that's problematic. It's the nilva that can become unnilvad. A gior, a conversion, you cannot undo. They are Jewish forever. A nilva can technically be undone. So when you attack the nilva aspect of ger, and then you cause them to go to their idolatry, then you've done a very, very, very bad thing. You've done idolatry yourself. 2220, 2220. Ger, onus devarim, onus mamon, ki ger, moderech mom, shebecha, vercha. Okay. Zoivich, ger habon is goyim, modina zom, okay, shrayach. Let's go now to the Sifri commentary where Rashi gets his stuff. 2220, 2220, 2220, 2220. Why do I have a bookmark here? Because probably that's where I use this shirt to Kaisel. There you go. Still bookmarked. All right. 2220. The ger, don't taunt the ger. And the Sifri is going to say, the ger lo sona velo, don't oppress him, ki gerim, you all were in Egypt. Okay, don't do it with words, don't do it with money. Okay, you were sacrificing to gods yesterday. The blemish in you don't say to your friend. Gerim are beloved. God said, don't taunt the ger, you should love the ger. Know the nefesh of ger. They turn away from evil. They're beloved like the flock. It's so great. The king's love for ger. God loves ger. Gerim were servants, Israel's servants. The Jews are ministers, the Gerim are ministers. Hey, Jacques, do you want to hear an example of Gerim? You want to hear an example of Gerim? Isaiah 56:3. How do you like that? Isaiah 56:3 is an example of Gerim. Israel has a covenant, and Gerim have a covenant. It's Isaiah 56. There's your ger Shabbat. Abraham was called himself a ger and V'toshav Anachi. David called himself a ger. It sounds like if you can call yourself a ger, that's how you make yourself a ger. If you can honestly call yourself a ger, then you're a ger. Then there's the whole famous Isaiah 44:5. And there's the convert ger and the ger, which is the difference between Geri Hatzedek and Geri Tzedek. And again, that the Rashi commentator there and all the commentators suggest that Bali Tshuva are in there as well. So we see that ger is a vast, vast topic. That's Lafib Shuto, Jacques. The Onkelos says giura, which is all types of ger. It really is just a loose term ger in this verse, in this concept. And you would probably have to prove you're a ger if you're very far away from the concept. Like me, it would probably be very hard for me to prove that I'm a ger. right? If you said yesterday I was eating treif and today I'm not, well, that was like 20 years ago. So am I really a Baal Tshuva to where I could say, you're taunting me? Maybe. But there are certain people that are in the fire more that is clearly taunting the ger. And a person's heart knows, and God knows your heart. God loves the ger. If you think God loves you because you're a ger, then I think that's the answer. Only the ger would know. Only the ger would know if they're being taunted. I don't know if I would say in my mind that you taunted the ger if you said I was treif. I wouldn't call that a ger. I would just call you rude for another reason, like whitening the face of your friend. But here, there's plenty to say about taunting the ger. All right, that's Onus Devarim in the Sifri. Let's go now to Meir Kahana. And that was, I think, chapter 9. Here we go. Okay. Meir Kahan. That behold, it says in the Mishnah, and Bava Metzia 58b, when you rip somebody off in sales and so forth with words, do not say to him, how much does it cost? And you don't want to buy it. If he's a Baal Tshuva, you don't say, remember your earlier deeds. Ben Gerim and a ger. As it says, don't taunt the ger and don't oppress the ger. Now remember, Meir Kahana is talking ger toshav about the conquered Canaanites that have to pay tax and go into servitude, and they can only convert to Judaism to get out of their lowly state. So it sounds like a contradiction, doesn't it? We are good to Gerim, and we enslave the Canaanites. So Meir Kahan would say that the verse contradicts his ideology, if we were to say that, right? So he's coming to say, wait a second. When you look in Exodus 22:20, Agav Mikan Raya Shaka Asher Nimse B'Torah Lashon Ger B'Stam. When the Torah says Ger Stam, the Kavana is Ger Tzedek and not Ger Toshav. And look what I wrote further on. He's saying the Ger that I'm not to taunt is not the Ger Toshav Canaanite, but Ger Stam Ger Tzedek. Now the question is, what is a Ger Tzedek? Rav Kahan has brought it to our attention. The 7 law only Canaanite type of Ger Toshav, like an Evid, that we were not talking about last night at the wall, right? Your worker, your Evid, your slave, your Canaanite, those are derogatory terms for derogatory people. That's not who we have this mitzvah to. So Rav Kahan is addressing, in the greater world of Ger, who is the Ger? We said it's anybody who can call himself a Ger. The Canaanite wants to call himself a Canaanite. He just happens to be a type of Ger. So Rav Kahan says called Ger Tzedek. And what we have shown is the convert is usually Ger Tzedek. But we've seen the Ger Tzedek can be an Evid Kanani, which is an elevated level of Canaanite. In the 10 Commandments, a ger that is nilva onto Israel is called a Ger Tzedek. Someone who comes from a very far place, right? Geri HaTzedek, a far place as opposed to nearby, says the Malbim is a Ger Tzedek non-Jew. Malchus of Etzilis for Nefesh HaGer is Ger Tzedek. So when the opposition is confused, that Ger Tzedek translates as convert. Ger Tzedek is not a convert. It can be a convert, and it can be a non-Jew. And you can refer to the class at the wall about Ger Tzedek. So that was how we brought Nani, isn't that the shear that you sent out anyways? Was my Ger Tzedek shear? Was that a 1 or 2? Did you not send out the Ger Tzedek shear that brought the criticism back about 58b? 1 or 2, Nani? Hello. I think it is. So therefore, the Ger, let's go back to the Gemara and see if now we can make it make sense. Let's go and see if we can make it make sense. We're back in Bava Metzia, 58b. Rav Kahana wants it to say that it's the Ger Tzedek. Our research in Ger Tzedek shows it can be convert or non-Jew. Let's see if that's true. And I am a poet and I didn't know it. Mas Nisan, the Mishnah. Just like you can rip someone off in sales, you can rip him off with words. Don't say how much does it cost. You don't want to buy it. If he was a Baal Tshuva, you don't say, remember the deeds of your earlier deeds. If he's Gerim, don't say, remember your deeds, as it says, Ger lo soine. That's so you don't taunt the Ger. That becomes Ger Tzedek. So the actual Mishnah never spoke about a Ger. It spoke about a Baal Tshuva and Ben Gerim. The Baal Tshuva did a sin and returned. Ben Gerim was born from sinners, but never sinned. You understand? And the Torah Tamima said, don't say the Baal Tshuva. Taunt is the exact same as Ben Gerim. Nonetheless, it carries the same penalty. So now, we learn the Baal Tshuva and Ben Gerim from Ger. From Ger. Don't taunt the Ger. Just thinking out loud. Just thinking. Hold on. Go back in our minds. We looked up Ger. Anyone go? So we saw Rashi's definition. We saw King David. Anyone that can call themselves Ger. The Baal Tshuva comes under the Geder. It's a Geder. There's your word, James Gosnell. Nani, mark that word. It's a Geder. It's a Geder. The Baal Tshuva is in the Geder of Ger. Just like the Muslims are in the Geder of Canaanites. Just like a Noahide today, more than 7 go to heaven, is in the Geder of Ger Toshav. That greater Geder is called Ger Tzedek. Now, how do we learn, or where can we see it written, a great composite of this Ger Tzedek character? That'd be nice. That's probably one of the hardest things that we are faced with. Because the Ger in the verse will say it's Rav Kahan, Ger Tzedek, not Ger Toshav. Thereby, the Ger Tzedek is the easy answer for this entire sugya. How do we find great commentary on Ger Tzedek? That would be a wonderful task. I mean, we gave the shear on it, but that's where people are tripping up. What is Ger Tzedek? They don't understand that it's a Geder and not only a type of convert. It's not only a type of convert, it can be a non-Jew. It's a huge term that the Baal Tshuva halachically can enter that conversation, yet Ger Tzedek is not a definition for a Baal Tshuva. Okay. All right, let's look at the commentaries on the Gemara. How you guys holding up? How you guys holding up? Again, the only opposition is going to be Rabbi Katz is wrong about Ger Tzedek being a non-Jew. And that's just not learning enough from their behalf in Amaratzis. 58b. With the Rush. See if the Rush wants to talk about Gerim. Okay. So the Ger has the same complaint as the Baal Tshuva. The Ger who comes to learn Torah, you don't say the mouth that ate and the velas and trefas. And now you want to learn from Metzia Gavoira. So that's why the Bo Tshuva is very Gary. Because he has the exact same taunt coming back to him. That's the exact answer of the refutation. A ger is not defined as Bo Tshuva. A Bo Tshuva gets the same taunt as the ger. Therefore, the Bo Tshuva enters the geder of a ger derech drush. That's a quote. Nani, please quote that. Nani, type 1 on confirmation, please. There you go. All right. So the Rush gave us a nice little chiddush over there. Marsha, see if he's got anything for us. $58B. Where's our friend the Ger? The Ger ate Nevelas. You want to hear a wonderful taunt on the Ger? You want to hear how ignorant is ignorant? Who wants to know what ignorant means? The Ger that eats Nevelas wants to learn Torah, and the guy says, yesterday you were eating Nevela, and today you want to learn Torah. What's the chiddush? What's the chiddush? He was supposed to eat Nevela, boys and girls. You're taunting the Ger. His one mitzvah that he does is to eat Nevela. Is that not incredible? You're taunting him for eating Nevela, and Ger is defined, Ger Toshav Elchon Nevelas, because he eats Nevela. Pure Amaratzis to taunt the Ger like that. In fact, that's how you know Dafka it's a non-Jew. Think about this. If you have to say 1A and 1B, a convert used to eat carrion, and now he's kosher, and you want to learn Torah? That's one scenario. Or Ger Toshav Elchon Nevelas, yesterday you were eating carrion, and today you want to learn Torah. Which one is the tighter shot? 1A or 1B? Meaning the convert or the Ger non-Jew? Is that not incredible? The Jew who doesn't get Ger sees the Ger eating Nevela, and then the Ger shows up to the Beis Midrash to learn Torah. The Jewish guy says, you were eating Nevela, now you're learning Torah? Hey, Buster Brown, Gerim learn Torah and Gerim eat Nevela. That's why it's Soro Marah. They have a Yetzer to turn away from evil. It's called oscillation. Who does that make more sense for, the Ger or the convert? 5 years ago, you used to eat Nevela, and 5 years ago you converted, and now you're still learning Torah. Does that make sense? Does that honestly make sense to anybody? To make the convert in pole position 1A of don't taunt the Ger over Nevela and learning Torah. When it's exactly reality for the non-Jew. We got this thing very, very tight. Very, very tight. What do you think, Nani? Just looking up some things here. Hold on a second. Okay, so the Maram Shif wants to say the Ger is learned from don't taunt the Ger. The Bo Tshuva Ma'amiso. Let's look that up now. That's kind of what I was looking for. This is very nice. Ma'amiso. Different verse. Lo tuna ish es amiso. So I thought, okay. Let's go back now. 59b. And Gimel. Dalid is another Ger verse. Hey. Okay, so there's two Ger verses, Exodus 22:20 and Vayikra 19:33. And the Bo Tshuva verse, according to the Maram Shif, is Vayikra 25:17. Everyone, let's go now. Vayikra 25:17. And that should bring us home. Because the whole point was the Bo Tshuva. Remember that? All right, 25:17 in Vayikra. 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 Okay. 25:17 in Vayikra. Now here we should find the source of the Baal Tshuva, and does it sound Gary? What did I say, 25:17? Let's read the English on this. Each of you shall not aggrieve his fellow. Do not taunt your fellow man. And you shall fear God, for I am Hashem your God. So it's going to be taunt. What does it mean, your fellow? What is a fellow? Who is your fellow? Amiso. It's not your friend. It's not your brother. What is an amiso? Uncleus, gvar, a guy. It's like he's not a wimpy little guy. It's a regular guy. So again, the Canaanite is like a wimpy guy. It's someone that you really have no business doing. You clearly are starting a problem. Kani's here, al dvar onus dvarim, says Rashi, shalo yakni ish es chavero velo yasheno eidsa she'ena hogenis. So you're giving advice, bad advice to your friend, Rashi says. But it is onus dvarim. So basically the concept is onus dvarim, and the Baal Tshuva and the Ger both have a warning not to taunt. Again, you are not to taunt with words. That's the source here. Then it comes as the Ger you don't taunt, and a Baal Tshuva. Obviously anybody, but you have a reason to taunt the Ger and the Baal Tshuva. Because yesterday they were eating treif, and today they're not. The Ben Gerim is a little different, because he didn't really do anything. So the Baal Tshuva and the Ger are very similar. They're not necessarily both called a Ger, but they're both called don't taunt. But don't taunt is not only Baal Tshuva and Ger, because that could be anybody. So the other verse calls it a Ger. We call that Srichusa. You need both. You need both. So that's why the Maram Shiv said the other verse is Ger, and this one is Baal Tshuva. But that's Lafi Pshuto, because this verse can be anybody, not only a Baal Tshuva. All right, that's the Chumash. Let's go now to the Torah Tamima. $25.17 towards me. Lo Tona Osono Tana Rabbana Kishahu Amir. Okay. Honest Momon Omar. Wow. Okay. Hamani Makayim Olasono Ese Misho. So this is the concept of don't taunt with words. And as the Mishnah said, the examples are the Ben Gerim, the Ger, the Baal Tshuva. that's who you don't taunt with words. So there's something called taunting with words. We have examples. The examples, the only question then would be, outside of a ger and a bal tshuva, both being examples of don't taunt, do the ger and the bal tshuva have anything else in common to strengthen the similarity? Yesterday, they were both eating treif. They both came from very far away. David was called a bal tshuva. He was called himself a ger. I would say it's almost like a cognate, right? The ger and the bal tshuva, as Isaiah 44:5 brings them, they are very, very closely related. Rabbi Nachman brings it many times in the Kuti Moran, the bal tshuva and the ger, very closely related. And they come from the same verses.